There are times in life when we cling with all our strength to things that no longer belong to us. Relationships, opportunities, plans that didn't go as we expected. It's hard for us to let go. It's hard for us to accept that maybe that wasn't the path God had for us. But let me tell you something. When you learn to let go, when you decide to let go of what is no longer part of you, you open space for God to surprise you with something much better. He hasn't brought you all the way to leave you. Halfway, His plan is bigger, more perfect, and more incredible than you can imagine. So don't force anything. Don't insist on what no longer flows. Trust that what comes from God comes with peace, with purpose, and at the perfect time. Before you start, I want you to take a moment and declare your trust in God. Write in the comments, "Lord, I trust in you and let go of what is not for me." Amen. Leave it as a declaration of faith and prepare for what God has for you. Verse 1, Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 11. "For I know the plans I have for you," the Lord affirms, plans of good and not of calamity, in order to give you a future and a hope. These words resonate with force in times when life seems dark and uncertain. It's easy to get lost in the confusion of everyday problems, the anxiety of tomorrow, and the weight of the past. Yet this verse reminds us of a powerful truth. God has a purpose for each of us, a plan designed with love, care, and a vision far greater than we can imagine. We are often faced with situations that they make us question if there really is a clear path for us. We may feel trapped in our struggles, seeing only the obstacles and not the opportunities, but God tells us that His plan is one of well-being, not calamity. Even though we face difficult times, even though the trials seem endless, He continues to work in silence, aligning every circumstance for our growth and well-being. What today seems like a closed door, tomorrow can be revealed as a blessing disguised. This verse also speaks to us of hope, a firm and real hope that does not depend on our circumstances but on God's faithfulness. It is not a mere illusion or an empty desire, but a certainty based on His unchanging character. He does not promise a life without challenges, but a life full of purpose and direction. Every step we take, even those that seem wrong or difficult, are part of a path that leads us to something far greater than we can imagine. When we look at this verse in context, we see that God was speaking to the people of Israel in a time of exile, a time when they had lost everything, when they were far from home and what they considered their safety. And even in the midst of that uncertainty, God assures them that He has a perfect plan for them, that His story is not over, that there is still a future full of hope. In the same way in our lives, even if we feel that we have lost our way, that everything is out of control, God continues to work. He continues to guide us towards His purpose. The challenge is to trust, to surrender our own plans and expectations to God, believing that what He has for us is much better than we could design on our own. Many times we cling to our ideas, to what we think is best. And when things don't go the way we want them to, we get frustrated. But the key is to remember that God sees the big picture. He knows what we need when we need it, and how He will get us there when we face moments of certainty. This verse invites us to stop, breathe, and remember that God has promised us a future full of hope. We are not there. Every encounter, every struggle, every gift is part of a divine plan meant especially for us. It is a fact that calms us alone in our path. We are not the result of chance, nor are we wandering without direction. Imagine for a minute how different our lives would be if we really believed in this promise every day. If every morning you woke up certain that God was at work, that our concerns would be in the dark. It would help us to perceive issues from a different angle and enable us to overcome them with bravery and live with thanks for every possibility that presents itself, independent of how tough the road may appear right now. God has not forgotten you. He has not ceased working in your life, nor will. He has already laid out a future for you, one full of purpose, well-being, and hope. Even in cases when we cannot see Him clearly, His love and grace are always there and guide us step by step. So when you feel like things don't make sense, when fear of the future wants to paralyze you, remember this promise. God has a perfect plan for your life, a plan of well-being, a plan full of hope. Trust in Him. His timing is perfect and His purpose will be fulfilled in your life in a way that will exceed all your expectations. Verse 2, Proverbs chapter 3 verses 5 and 6. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and not in your own understanding. In all your ways, and He will make your path straight." These words lead us to reflect on something fundamental. Trust. We live in a world where we are constantly told that we must depend on our logic, our experience, and our own decision-making. Strength teaches us that control is in our hands, that we can figure it all out with enough planning and effort. But it dreams when we are faced with situations that are beyond our control. When life presents us with challenges that seem to have no solution, it is in those moments that this verse comes to life. God invites us to trust Him with all our hearts, not with partial faith or with hidden doubts, but with total surrender, and that is where we often fail. Trusting God means letting go of our natural tendency to want to be in control of everything. It means letting go of the need to understand every detail before taking the next step. It is easy to say that we trust God when everything is going well, but the true test of trust arises when things get complicated, when the answers do not come, and when we feel like we're at a dead end. This verse also warns us about something very important. Not to trust our own intelligence, because even though we think we know what's best for us, our vision is limited. We only see part of the picture. While God sees the whole picture, we cling to our logic, to our plans, and when something doesn't go as we expected, we get frustrated. But God tells us that His wisdom is greater, that His ways are higher than ours, and that what we don't understand today makes sense tomorrow. Trusting Him implies letting go of the arrogance of believing that we always know what is best and surrendering our lives to His direction. When He says recognize Him in all your ways, He is reminding us that God does not want to be just a part of our life. He wants to be in every area. In every decision, at every step. We sometimes seek God only when things get complicated, when we feel that we can no longer take it anymore, but the invitation is to always recognize Him in the small and the great, in the everyday and in the extraordinary. When we put God at the center of our decisions, when we seek His will before acting, He guides us in ways we do not even imagine. And here comes the most powerful promise from this verse: He will smooth your paths. It does not say that the path will be easy and that there will be no obstacles, but it does assure us that God will make way where there seems to be no way out, that He will make things fall into place in His due time, that they will clear solutions on our own. But when we stop struggling and decide to surrender to God, the pieces begin to fall into place in surprising ways. Imagine how different our life would be. We would learn to trust God completely rather than obsessing over every detail. If instead of depending just on our logic, we surrendered every step to His direction, the peace we would experience would be indescribable, since He knows what we need. He knows which doors should open and which should be closed, and He will do so in the future and will stop bearing the weight of uncertainty. The perfect moment. Surrendering our life to God does not mean doing nothing or being passive. It means acting in faith, moving forward, trusting that He directs us and being willing to follow His will, even when we do not understand everything immediately. It is a daily process of surrender, of learning to trust more and to depend less on our own understanding. And when we do this, when we recognize God in every aspect of our life, He is in charge of straightening our path, of guiding us along paths of justice and peace. So the next time you feel that life is uncertain, that you don't know what decision to make, or that things don't go as expected, remember this promise: trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't depend on your own intelligence, and you will see how He opens the way where there is none. God is always in control. We just need to recognize Him, surrender our plans to Him, and walk in faith, knowing that His direction is perfect. Verse 3, Isaiah chapter 55, verses 8 and 9 says, "For my thoughts are not yours, nor are your ways mine, the Lord declares. My ways and my thoughts are higher than yours, higher than the heavens on earth." These words remind us of a truth that we sometimes find hard to accept our understanding. Though God sees things from a far higher standpoint, it's restricted. Though God, in His great wisdom, understands what we really need, we hang to our plans and assumptions of how things ought to be. When our needs differ from our wants, or when we sincerely pray for something and get no answer from God, we often get frustrated. This chapter reminds us that what God has ready is much more than what we believe to be the correct answers or what best fit us. Greater than our wildest dreams, what today appears like a challenge will become a gift tomorrow. God's ideas are on a whole other level outside of our comprehension. Hence, what we see as a loss in the future will be shown as divine protection. Beyond our human constraints, depending on God's methods involves letting go of control, letting go of impatience, and learning to walk in faith, even if we do not comprehend everything. There are uncertain times in life when events appear illogical. God, however, is painstakingly creating a perfect blueprint from which every component fits. If we believe in God's sovereignty, we have to accept that His plan is always superior, even if it's not. We frequently oppose God's direction as we don't comprehend it. Real wisdom is in trusting the all-understanding One rather than in knowing everything. God sees chances where we see mistakes. His methods always bring us to a better place, even if they appear strange at times. What today feels as a delay, a disappointment, or even a failure is part of a greater good, opening doors in places we never considered and taking us down paths that, even if they are not the ones we plan, are the ones we really need to accept. This truth transforms the way we face life, frees us from fear, helps us let go of anxiety, and gives us the confidence that we don't have to have it all figured out. We can rest in the assurance that God is in controlling, that He sees beyond our present, and that His love and purpose for us are unwavering. Letting go of questioning and starting to trust is the greatest act of faith we can perform when you feel like life is meaningless. When doors close, when plans fail, remember these words: God has higher thoughts, bigger plans, and more perfect paths than we could ever imagine. No, we need to understand everything. We just need to trust that He is in control. He knows what He is doing. He knows where He is leading us, and His purpose will always be fulfilled in our lives in a way that will surpass all our expectations. Verse 4, Psalms chapter 37, verse 7, says, "Be silent before the Lord and wait on Him patiently. Do not be irritated by the success of others or by those who plot evil." Many times we want to rush before God. We want things to happen our way and in our time, but this scripture shows us that real power is not in our time. When we learn to be quiet, when we stop running against the clock, when we learn to be patient instead of hurried, then is when we truly start to see God's hand at work in our life. Waiting is a test of faith. When God asks us to wait, it is not because He has forgotten our pleas or because He is neglecting our needs, but rather because He is preparing something more greater than we could ever dream. So, while we wait, we are in the making. We face one of the greatest challenges: comparison. We look around and see others prosper. We see how they achieve success, how they achieve what we have asked for so much, and that fills us with unease. We wonder why they do and we don't, why their paths seem clear while we continue to face obstacles. But God tells us clearly, don't be irritated. Don't let comparison steal your peace, because His plan for each person is unique and perfect. Envy and frustration are silent thieves of our inner peace. When we focus on what others have, on what they are achieving, we stop seeing what God is doing in us. We begin to measure our lives with standards that do not correspond to us, and we move away from the purpose that God has for us. But this verse reminds us that we are not in competition with anyone. God has different times for each one of us, and His work in our lives does not stop because of the success of others. In fact, many times what seems success from the outside is nothing more than an illusion, and what we believe to be a delay in our life is actually a preparation for something much greater. God calls us to trust Him, to wait patiently, not to be carried away by the anxiety of wanting everything now, and the key to achieving it is in gratitude. When we learn to be grateful for what we have, for the process we are in, for the lessons we are learning, we stop worrying so much about the success of others, and we start to focus on our own growth. True peace comes when we stop comparing ourselves and start enjoying the one in which God has us. Waiting in God, it is not easy, but it is powerful. It is in waiting that our character is formed, where we learn to depend completely on it, where our faith is strengthened. Every moment of waiting is an opportunity to grow, to draw closer to God, to trust in His sovereignty and rest in His love. Because when we learn to wait, we stop in our own strength and allow God to act in His perfect time. If you feel that life is not moving forward as you expected, that others are accomplishing things and you do not remember this verse, be silent, wait on God patiently, and do not get carried away by frustration. Trust that He is working, that His plans for you are greater than you can imagine, and that His timing is perfect. Do not allow impatience or comparison to rob you of the peace, because what God has prepared for you will come at the exact right time. Verse 5, Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 1 says, "Everything has its right time. There is a time for everything that is done under heaven." This truth resonates in every aspect of our lives. We find ourselves constantly running, trying to achieve goals, to fulfill dreams, to force situations. But this verse reminds us that life follows a divine rhythm, a pace that we cannot rush or delay. There is a perfect time for everything, and understanding this gives us peace, teaches us to let go of anxiety and trust that everything will happen when it should happen. It is difficult to accept that we are not always in control, that our plans will not be fulfilled exactly as we imagine them. We want things to happen now. We want to see immediate results. We want our prayers to be answered immediately. But the reality is that God operates in a perfect time, a time that many times we do not understand. What today seems like a delay, in reality it is a preparation. What we believe to be a closed door can be God protecting us from something that we are not ready to face. His time is impeccable because He sees the whole picture while we only see a small part. Each stage of life has its purpose. There are moments of joy and moments of sadness, times of sowing and times of harvest, times of waiting and times of action. Sometimes we want to skip the difficult seasons. We want everything to be quick and easy, but it is in those moments of trial that God works in us, molding our character, strengthening our faith, and preparing us for what is to come. If everything came effortlessly, without process, we would never truly appreciate the value of things. Patience teaches us to value each achievement, to enjoy every step of the way, and to understand that real growth takes time. This verse also invites us to be wise and to discern times. We cannot force a season that has not yet arrived, just as we cannot hold on to one that is already over. Sometimes it is difficult for us to let go of what no longer serves us, what has kept us stagnant, because we are afraid of the new from the unknown. But God calls us to trust in His perfect chronology, to let go with gratitude what has already fulfilled its purpose, and to receive with hope what is to come. Every change is an opportunity, every closing is a new door waiting to be opened. When we understand that everything has its time, we stop comparing our life with that of others. We realize that each person is in the fact that someone else is accomplishing something now doesn't mean that we are behind. Everyone has their own rhythm, their own path, their own process. Comparing ourselves, it only robs us of peace and fills us with unnecessary anxiety. The key is to concentrate on our own development, on our own progress, and to believe that God is working even if we cannot see it. Impatience causes us to question. Making hurried choices causes us to chase after events that deviate from God's intention for us. Yet, when we learn to believe that everything will arrive at its perfect moment, we discover a calm above our knowledge. No matter how hard we try to believe it in the moment of time, what is for us no one can take away, and what is not will never be. God is the key to living without stress, without fear of the future, without the weight of uncertainty. When we surrender to God's timing, we begin to see His hand in every detail. We realize that what once troubled us today makes sense. That delays were protections in disguise, that wait times were necessary to prepare us for what was coming. God is never late, never wrong, and the clock is always perfectly in sync with its purpose for our life. So when you feel like life isn't moving forward the way you'd like, when it seems like your prayers aren't being answered, remember this verse: everything has its timing. There's a perfect timing for everything that's done under heaven. Trust, let go, and keep moving forward in faith, because when the time is right, everything will fall into place as perfectly as possible. Verse 6, Philippians chapter 4 verses 6 and 7 says, "Don't be anxious about anything, but rather on all occasions with prayer and present your requests to God and give Him thanks, and the peace of God that passes all understanding will guard your hearts and your thoughts in Christ Jesus." This promise is a powerful reminder that we are not alone in our struggles, that we don't need to carry the weight of our worries, because God offers us a peace that goes beyond our logic, a peace that floods the Enu's heart in the midst of the most intense storms. Restlessness is something that constantly haunts us. We worry about the future, about our finances, about our health, about our relationships. We are anxious about things that have not yet happened, about situations that are out of our control, and we forget that God has given us an alternative prayer. He invites us to bring Him every burden, every fear, every desire, with the confidence that He hears, that He cares about every detail of our life. And it is not just about asking, but about doing it with a grateful heart. Gratitude transforms our perspective, helps us see beyond the problem, and reminds us that God has been faithful in the past and will continue to be so in the future. When we present our petitions to God, it doesn't mean that problems will grow instantly, but it does mean that we will no longer be alone in the battle. Anxiety vanishes when we remember that we are in the hands of the Almighty, that there is nothing too big or too small for Him. Prayer is not just a religious routine, it is a conversation with the Creator of the universe, a direct connection with the one who is in absolute control of the universe. All things considered, the tranquility God bestows upon us makes this promise very remarkable. This is a peace that stays even when everything around us appears to be in turmoil. It is not a calm based on everything being in order or circumstances changing in our favor. Only God can provide a profound peace in the soul. This is security based on what we see rather than what we perceive. In who He is, that peace protects our heart from despair, from anguish, from negative thoughts that try to steal our hope. The world tells us that we must worry, that we must be in control, that if we do not solve our problems, no one else will, but God tells us something different. He tells us to let go, to trust that we will give Him every burden. True faith is manifested when we decide to leave our worries, and gratitude is key in this process. When we give thanks even before we see the answer. Thanking does not mean ignoring problems, it means recognizing that God is at work, that His plan is perfect, and that His love for us never fails. Gratitude takes us out of the state of concern and leads us to a state of faith, to a place where hope replaces uncertainty. Many times we look for peace in the wrong places. We think we will find it in success, in possessions, in the recognition of others. But true peace only comes from God, no matter how many achievements we achieve. If we do not have that peace we will always feel an emptiness. That is why this verse invites us to go directly to the source, to present everything to God, to trust in His care, and to rest in His promise of peace. Imagine how your life may turn out. If instead of worrying you choose to pray, if every time you felt anxiety engulfing you, you chose to offer your problems to God instead of being swept away by fear, you would live more happily, with more pleasure, with more trust that everything has a reason and that nothing is there. Verse 7, Matthew chapter 6 verse 33 states, "But seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things, these words will be added to you." Every day that you are not alone, that God is with you, and that His love will never fail you. It is in God's flawless supply, not in our power. Everybody suffers with anxiety about tomorrow. We worry about it, wondering whether we will have enough, if our objectives will be reached, and if we will reach what we want. This chapter reminds us, nevertheless, that God takes care of the rest when we give Him first priority. He pledges to provide our needs depending on His will and is aware of them. Though everything won't happen as we want or right away, His provision will be ideal and enough at the appropriate moment. It's not just about sometimes praying or going to church on Sundays. It's about giving God first priority in all choices and living in line with His design. We struggle with trust sometimes. When God is your first concern, give Him your plans, believe in His plans, and wait on Him and His time. His blessings will follow you and His peace will last. His love will lead you. Everything else will come, probably not as you anticipated, but as you really need it. Psalms chapter 46 verse 8, "Be still, recognize that I am God. I will be honored on earth and among the countries." These phrases lead our restless spirit, our heart that searches for answers and quick fixes all the time. God teaches us something very different: remain still. While everything is in a rush and each day we are inundated with the impulse to accomplish more, to achieve more, to never stop. And this does not mean surrender or be passive, but to trust fully that He is in control, that we do not need to despair, because His power and purpose are above all else. It is difficult to sit still when we face problems, when anxiety about the future invades us, or when things seem to have no solution. Our nature drives us to want to solve everything on our own, to look for answers everywhere but God. But this verse teaches us that the real solution is not in our constant struggle, but in stopping, breathing, and recognizing that He is God. Recognizing Him means understanding that His sovereignty is absolute, that His will is perfect, and that nothing is out of His reach. Stillness, it is not inactivity, it is trust. It is learning to rest in the certainty that God is at work, even when we do not see Him, even when we do not understand His plan. Sometimes we believe that God's silence is absence, but in reality it is an invitation to trust more deeply, to depend completely on Him. In the midst of chaos, in the midst of uncertainty, God calls us to calm. He calls us to a faith that does not exist. It staggers, it doesn't get carried away by external circumstances. When we stand still before God, we allow Him to work in our lives in ways we never imagined. We give Him space to act, to direct our steps, to open doors that we could never open on our own. And the most powerful thing is that in that stillness we begin to see His greatness, to experience His presence in a deeper way. It is in the calm where His voice becomes clearer, where His direction becomes more evident. This verse also reminds us that God will be exalted among the nations, that He will be exalted in the no matter what is happening around us, no matter how chaotic the world seems. God is still in absolute control. His glory does not depend on our circumstances. His power does not change because of what we face. He remains the same yesterday, today, and always. And in the end, His purpose will prevail. Knowing this gives us security. It gives us peace. It allows us to let go of worries and rest in His promise. Stop fighting with our own strength and remain still before God. It is an act of faith. That is, God trusted you, in your time, in your plan, even if you don't understand it. It is to recognize that He is above everything we can fear for you. A pointless struggle tomorrow might be revealed as preparation for a bigger benefit. God never wastes an experience. Every circumstance we encounter is a part of the plan He has created especially for us. The trick is to believe, to give our life to His will, and to realize His is much more than we could ever conceive. We know God's will when we love Him and follow His calling. Many times we try to understand everything. We want immediate answers. We want to see the end result before we trust. Yet, faith is about walking without seeing the end of the road. Everything we face has a purpose. Even closed doors, delays, and disappointments is being used by God to mold us, strengthen us, and bring us to the destiny He has prepared. There is nothing beyond His control. nothing that happens without his knowledge. The key is to keep our eyes on God, on his faithfulness, on his promises, and not let transient events control us. When we face challenges, it is easy to fall into despair, doubt, and frustration. But this verse invites us to look beyond it. God is at work even if we do not feel it. His timing is perfect, his plan is flawless, and every detail is designed for our growth and well-being. Recall that God is working on something we cannot see even in the middle of difficulties. Every battle, every hurdle is a chance for us to develop, learn, and become closer to him. God uses our errors to educate us and our losses to show us. He uses even our falls to raise us up stronger. Believing this promise reduces our anxiousness, helps us to let go of control, and comforts us of the safety of our life. Every experience. Imagine how your life would be different if you spent each day knowing that God was in charge of every aspect instead of worrying about it. Knowing that nothing is off his plan, you live more deliberately, with greater thankfulness and serenity. That is the invitation of this verse, to entrust, to surrender, to walk in faith, knowing that God is working all things together for our good. So no matter what you're facing today, no matter how hard the road may seem, God is in control. He's using every situation to shape you, to guide you, to get you to the exact place where you need to be. Trust in his plan. Cause everything that happens in your life has an eternal purpose, and his love will never fail you. Verse 10, 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 7 says, we live by faith, not by sight. These words directly confront us with the way we face life. They teach us that true trust in God is not based on what we can see, touch, or understand, but on the certainty that he is at work even when everything seems uncertain. We live in a world that tells us we need proof, that we must see to believe, but God calls us to walk in a different way, trusting in his character and his faithfulness. Even though circumstances seem to contradict him, life is full of moments when we don't see the way clear, when everything seems dark and meaningless. We wonder if we're headed in the right direction, if God is really with us. Although our prayers have been answered, faith reminds us that God is who he is, and his promise to always be with us transcends our feelings or observations. We won't always see instantaneous results. We won't always grasp his strategy. Still, we can be certain he is at work in every element of our life. Walking through faith is letting go of control, stopping to rely on our own talents, and believing that God has a higher mission. It entails faith that he will lead us methodically even if we have no idea precisely what lies ahead. Sometimes life presents us with seeming unworkable circumstances that cause anxiety. Nonetheless, faith helps us to go forward and trust that there is something beyond what is practical. Sight may fool us, notwithstanding what our human eyes can see. Situations might cause us to feel as if we are alone, that there is no fix, or that everything is out of our hands. Faith, however, comforts us that God is working quietly, that he is opening doors we have not yet encountered, and that every circumstance has a purpose. When we walk by sight, we allow ourselves be swept away by emotions. We are unsure because of uncertainty. However, when we walk by faith, we live with the conviction that God is in charge, that he is leading our steps, and that everything has an everlasting use. Not exist. It implies confronting every difficulty knowing God already has the answer, his love is enough, and his power is being used. Either by faith or by relying on the situation, faith may help one to carry away worries and anxieties. Choosing religion helps us to live with a tranquility the world cannot understand and with hope, free from depending on our surroundings. Faith tells us that there is a bigger goal in every circumstance we come into and lets us look beyond the here today. Imagine your life would be different if you ceased relying on the events around us. You see, and you will start to trust God. Instead of worrying about what you cannot control, you choose to rest in his faithfulness. You would live more freely, with more joy, and with greater conviction that God has everything under care. This chapter calls on us to live in faith, trust God, and daily recall his plan and purpose. It's better than ours, so don't get carried away by what you see today. Don't let circumstances dictate your faith. Decide to live trusting God, moving forward with security, knowing that he is with you, guiding you, holding you, and leading you towards his perfect purpose. Because when we live by faith, we live in victory, we live in peace, and we live with the certainty that even if we can't see the future, God has already prepared everything. Verse 11, Isaiah chapter 41 verse 10 says, "So do not be afraid, for I am with you. Do not be distressed, for I am your God. I will strengthen and help you. I will sustain you with my victorious right hand." These words are a powerful reminder that we are not alone in the midst of difficulties. How many times does fear take hold of us? How many times anxiety paralyzes us and makes us doubt everything? But God tells us with clarity, fear not, because he is with us. There is no problem too big, there is no circumstance too difficult for his power. His presence is the answer to all our fears. Fear is a human emotion that we all face at some point. We fear the future, we fear failure, we fear losing what we have, but God invites us to change our perspective. He tells us that we do not have to be anxious, because he is our God. That means we don't depend on our own strength or limited abilities. We have an almighty God who is by our side, guiding us, protecting us, and working on our behalf. Even when we can't see him, his presence gives us the assurance that no matter what we face, he will never leave us. Sometimes in the midst of trouble, we feel that our strength is exhausted, that we can't go on, but here is the truth. Most incredible promise. God will strengthen us. It is not about our ability to resist, but about his power working in our weakness. When we think we can no longer do it, he lifts us up, fills us with new strength, and reminds us that in him there is always hope. His help is constant. It never fails. He is willing to sustain us in the most difficult moments, to give us the ability to overcome any obstacle. God not only he promises to strengthen us, but also to help us. How many times have we tried to figure things out on our own? How many times have we felt like we are struggling alone, not knowing what to do? But he tells us that we don't need to do it alone, because his help is available to us. We just need to trust, stop relying on our own strategies, and hand over our burdens to him. He is our refuge, our shelter, and in every situation he is working for our good. We find it hard to let go control. It is difficult for us to stop worrying about what is out of our reach, but God invites us to rest in him, to believe in his faithfulness, to trust that his victorious right hand sustains us. We are not sustained by our own strength, but by the mighty hand of God, the same one that created the universe, the same one that opens paths where there are none, the same one that never loses a battle. He sustains us in every step, in every fall, in every attempt, reminding us that his victory is our victory. When we face moments of uncertainty, this verse gives us the certainty that we do not have to fear. God is with us in every challenge, in every process, in every situation that seems impossible. His presence changes our perspective. He gives us peace in the midst of chaos. He gives us hope when everything seems lost. He sustains us, he strengthens us, and it helps us to see beyond our present circumstances. No matter how big the storm is, his presence is greater. Fear and anguish are thieves of peace, but God's presence is our greatest security. When we focus on him, when we remember who he is and what he has promised, we find a strength that is beyond our comprehension. The key is to believe, to hold on to his promises, to remember that he is faithful, that he never abandons us, and that he is always working on our behalf. Imagine how your life would change if you truly believed this promise every day. If instead of worrying you would fully trust that God sustains you, that he is by your side every step of the way, you would live more peacefully, with more confidence, with more security that you are not alone. God is with you and his mighty hand holds you. So no matter what you are facing today, do not fear, do not be distressed. God is your strength, your help, your safe haven. Give him your worries, trust in his power, and rest in the certainty that he will never leave you. His victorious right hand is over your life, guiding you, protecting you, and leading you to the victory he has already prepared for you. Verse 12. Psalms chapter 55 verse 22 says, surrender your burdens to the Lord and he will take care of you. He will not allow the righteous to stumble and fall. How many times do we feel overwhelmed by the weight of life, by worries that seem to have no end, by problems that we do not know how to solve? We carry our burdens in silence, trying to pretend that everything is fine, when in reality our heart is full of anguish and despair. But here God makes us an invitation. Clara delivers your burdens. Don't cling to them. Don't try to carry them. Only he is ready to receive them, to ease your burden and to sustain you with his inexhaustible love. Trusting God and letting go of control is not easy. We are used to thinking that we must solve everything on our own, that it is our responsibility to find the way out of every situation. But God tells us something different. He tells us that we are not alone, that we do not have to carry the burden. He is eager to look after us more than we could handle. Turn every concern, every anxiety, every suffering into something exquisite. He just asks of us that we stop battling in our own power and believe that our problems belong in his hands. God wants us to live in a continuous relationship with him. He does not just want us to hand him our concerns. He wants us to offer him something amazing and to chat to him. We sense his tranquility, a peace more than human comprehension can grasp. We learn that he is still more significant, independent of the size of the storm. Great, His love is unbreakable, His faithfulness is eternal, and His power is enough to sustain us in any circumstance. Many times the problem is not the burden itself but our resistance to let go of it. We cling to fear, anxiety, uncertainty, believing that if we stop worrying everything will get out of control. But the truth is that control has never been in our hands. God is the one who has absolute control of our life, of our future, of everything around us, and when we finally understand it, we learn to live more peacefully, with more confidence, knowing that we are in the hands of a loving Father who will never let go of us. God promises that He will not allow the righteous to stumble and fall. This does not mean that we will not face trials, that there will be no difficult moments, but it does mean that He will always sustain us when we feel that we can't take it anymore, when we think we are on the edge of the abyss. He will be there to lift us up, to strengthen us, to remind us that we are not alone. His promise is Clara will not allow us to fall. He will keep us steadfast. He will guide us through every challenge with His mighty hand whenever we face a difficulty. Let us remember this truth. We do not have to carry it all alone. We do not have to carry weights that bring us down, because God is willing to carry them for us. The key is to surrender, to say, Lord, I give you this. I can't take it anymore, but I trust you, and in that moment we experience true freedom, true peace, true strength that only He can give. Sometimes we are tempted to think that our burdens are too small for God, that we shouldn't bother Him with our problems, but His love is so great, so immense, that He cares for each other. Trust, let go, and rest in His unbreakable promise. Verse 13, Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." These words are a direct invitation from Jesus. An invitation full of love and compassion for all those who are burdened, exhausted, feeling the weight of life on their shoulders. How many times have we felt thus overwhelmed by worries? For that we live in a world that constantly demands of us, that pushes us to run, to perform, not to stop. But here is Jesus telling us something completely different. Come to me, I will give you rest. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that we must do everything on our own, that we have to be strong all the time, that we can't show weakness. But God didn't make us to live exhausted, made us to depend on Him, and this invitation is exactly that. To let go of our burdens and find true rest in His presence, because the rest He offers is not physical. It is a rest for the soul, for the mind, for the heart. It is a rest that does not depend on circumstances but on the certainty that we are in His hands. The tiredness we carry is not always visible. Sometimes it is visible. Many times we suffer with emotional tiredness, a weight of anxieties and never-ending thoughts that never let us alone. We try to solve all of our issues and rule every element of our life, thereby draining us, emptying us, and devoid of power. Jesus informs us, nevertheless, that there is no need for us to carry on this manner. Though we can accomplish it on our own, He provides a space for us to relax, discharge our responsibilities, and spend time alone. Should we want His assistance, we must let go of our pride and submit to His unbounded love. Although it is a humble deed, it is also a religious one, as trusting God calls for believing that His rest is genuine, that His peace is sufficient, and that His love will always be with us. And when we decide to see Him, when we take that step, we find that the things of this world define genuine rest rather than the objects of this life. In His presence, the world offers many temporary solutions for tiredness, vacations, entertainment, distractions, but in the end, none of that really fills the emptiness we feel. Only in Jesus do we find the rest that our soul needs. Only in His love we find the peace that goes beyond any logic. His rest is complete, it is perfect, it is eternal. When we feel exhausted, the solution is not to do more, to try harder and to run faster. The solution is to stop, to go to Jesus, to give Him our burdens. He never crushes us. He never tells us that our worries are too small or too big. His love is unconditional. His grace is sufficient, and His rest is a gift that is available to all who seek Him. Life is not just about resisting, holding on, going on without stopping. It is about learning to rest in God, to learn to live trusting that He is in control, that His plan is perfect. When we learn to rest in Him, we stop living in fear, we stop worrying about what we cannot control, and we begin to enjoy life with a peace that only He can give. Imagine what your life would be like if, instead of carrying all the weight, you only decided to trust in God. If every time you felt tired, you simply went to Him and gave Him everything. Anxiety would lose its power, the three would cease to dominate you, and you would find a rest that would completely transform your way of life. Jesus is waiting for you to come to Him, to surrender your worries, to trust in His love, no matter how great your burden is, no matter how long you have carried it. Jesus is calling you. He promises you rest. God is telling us that He takes care of us, that his love is so great that he will not allow us to lack anything, that we are not abandoned or forgotten, that he knows every detail of our life, every fear and every need, and he is working on our behalf when we cannot see it, when we learn to trust God in our own way. Truth, our life changes. We stop living in fear, we stop worrying about what we can't control, and we begin to rest in his promise. His care is perfect, his love is inexhaustible, and his faithfulness is constant. There is nothing too big or too small for him. Every worry we have matters to him. Every detail of our life is in his hands, and he sustains us with his love. Imagine what your life would be like if you would stop worrying about tomorrow and start trusting God till you are there, preparing the way, taking care of each step. You would live with more peace, with more confidence, with the certainty that you do not have to have all the answers because God has them. Place them in him. Your anxiety is an act of faith. It is to tell him, Lord, I trust in you, in your love, in your care. And when you do this, your heart is filled with a peace that the world cannot give. Sometimes we believe that our worries are too insignificant for God, but the truth is that he cares about every aspect of our lives. He is not only present in the big problems, but also in the small details. He cares about our well-being, for our peace, for our future. His love is so great that he wants us to live free from anxiety, to learn to enjoy each day without the burden of fear and uncertainty. God does not, he promises that we will not face difficulties, but he does promise that we will never be alone in the midst of them. His care is real, his presence is constant, and his love never fails. When we learn to deposit our anxiety in him, we discover that we have no why live tied to fear. He sustains us, guides us, protects us, and gives us the assurance that his plan is perfect. Give everything to God, trust that he loves you, that his love is sufficient, that his power is stronger than any issue you encounter, and there's no reason to live with anxiety when you have a heavenly Father who cares for every detail of your life. Instead of continuing to carry everything in, instead of continuing to worry about what you can control, today is the moment to let go, to trust, to rest in the promise God has, that his love is more than any fears, his care is flawless, and his serenity is accessible to you. Give all of your worries to him. He who loves you more than you could ever fathom takes care of you with a love that never runs out. Forget the things of old. Do not dwell in the past. Verse 15, Isaiah chapter 43, says verses 18 and 19. I'm going to act differently. That's exactly happening. They have no idea I'm walking a road in the desert and rivers in barren areas. These words are an invitation to let go of what was and open our hearts to what God is now doing, a proclamation of hope. How many times do we find ourselves caught in the past, in the errors, in the disappointments, in the chances we passed on? We hang on scars and experiences that keep us from further motion. It seems barren, hopeless, without direction, but God is an expert in opening paths where there are none, in bringing rivers of life to the most desolate places, which today seems impossible. Tomorrow will be a testimony of his faithfulness. He is at work, preparing something better, aligning every detail for our good, even if right now we don't understand it. Sometimes we are so focused on our limitations, on our losses, that we don't realize that God, he is already doing something new. We have a hard time believing it because we are used to looking through the eyes of doubt, fear, insecurity, but God wants us to see with eyes of faith, to believe in his transforming power, to understand that his love for us is greater than any mistake of the past. His grace is enough to give us a new beginning, a new story, a life full of purpose. Every day it is an opportunity to let go of the past and embrace the new that God has for us. No matter how great the failure has been, how painful the loss has been, God can bring something new, something unexpected, something that exceeds our expectations. He is a God who makes roads in the middle of the desert, who turns dryness into fertility, who transforms what seemed lost into an opportunity for his glory. His power is limitless and his love is constant. Letting go of the past doesn't mean ignoring it or pretending it didn't happen. It means learning from it, taking it necessary to grow and move forward in faith. God does not define us by our mistakes, but by his love and his purpose for our life. He calls us to trust, to take the next step without fear, to believe that the best is yet to come. We make daily decisions to believe in him. We are one step closer to witnessing his work show up in our life in a manner we never could have predicted. Our mindset and our readiness to let go and advance will be the secret. We shall not be able to welcome what is to come if we keep grasping what was. God surprises us. He wants to demonstrate to us that his love is able to change any circumstance, no matter how dry, and that his power is beyond our grasp. God is at work. He is opening new paths. He is bringing life where there was death before. So open your eyes His love never fails. His plan for you is greater than you could imagine. Do not let the past steal your present. Do not let fear stop you from moving forward. Trust that you have control, that His hand guides you, and that the best is yet to come. Forget what is behind you and prepare for what God is bringing into your life. Because when God says He is doing something new, it is because He is really doing it, and His work is perfect. Verse 16, Hebrews chapter 10, verses 35 and 36. So do not lose confidence, because it will be greatly rewarded. They need to persevere so that after they have fulfilled God's will, they receive what He has promised. These words are a powerful reminder in those moments when we feel that nothing is moving forward. When the wait is long and uncertainty fills us with doubts, it is easy to lose confidence when we do not see immediate results, when efforts seem not to bear fruit. But God tells us clearly, do not lose confidence, because there is a reward waiting. Life is full of moments that test our faith. We pray, we work, we strive, but when things don't happen as we expected, we begin to doubt. We wonder if it is really worth it to keep believing, to keep fighting, to keep waiting. But God calls us to stand firm, to trust that His plan is perfect, that His timing is right, and that every effort, every step of faith will be rewarded in due time. The key is not to give up, to keep going despite the difficulties, because perseverance is the bridge between the promise and its fulfillment. God never calls us to a life without challenges, but He does promise us that if we persevere, we will see His faithfulness manifest in our lives. Perseverance is what takes us to new heights, what strengthens us, what allows us to grow and to mature in faith. Many times we want to see the promise fulfilled without going through the process, without going through the trials, but it is precisely in waiting that God molds our character, where He strengthens our confidence and prepares us to receive what He has promised. Every obstacle we face is an opportunity to demonstrate our faith, to trust that God is at work even if we do not see it. Trust is that force that keeps us firm when everything seems to go against us. It is knowing that God has not forgotten us, that He continues to work, that His plan has not changed, and that in the end His will be fulfilled in our lives in the most perfect way. It is not about understanding everything. It is about trusting Him above our circumstances. The reward comes for those who do not give up, for those who continue to move forward in spite of the hard times. God doesn't forget your faithfulness, your tears, your sacrifices. He sees every effort, every prayer, every step you take in faith, and He promises that if you persevere, you'll receive His reward. But perseverance isn't easy. It requires patience, it requires faith, and most of all, it requires an unwavering trust that God always keeps His promises. Sometimes the wait feels never-ending, when we feel as if we are caught in an unending season. However, God is working silently, getting ready something much more than we could possibly know. The secret is not to start to question His love, His confidence, or His strength. The adversary wants us to be promised. Thus, when we follow God's plan, we are proving that we believe in His faithfulness, that we trust in His word, and that we are ready to get what He has promised. Let us give up, think it's not worth going on, doubt God's plan, but this verse reminds us that the reward is for those who don't give up, for those who keep trusting, for those who don't let difficulties stop them. Perseverance is the key to achieving what God has prepared for us, and when we trust in Him, we know that His reward will be far greater than what we imagine. Every day you decide to trust God, every time you choose to move forward despite doubts, you are closer to receiving His promise. He has not forgotten you. He has not ignored your prayers. He has not stopped working in your life. His plan is still going on, and the reward comes for those who remain faithful, for those who trust without hesitation, for those who they persevere to the end. So don't lose confidence. Don't let waiting rob you. Faith, God is with you. He's strengthening you. He's guiding you. And in the end you'll receive what He has promised. Stand firm, keep believing, because the reward is coming, and it will be greater than you ever imagined. Verse 17, Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 8 says, "The Lord Himself will march before you and be with you. He will neither leave nor abandon you. Do not be afraid or discouraged." These words are a powerful reminder that we do not walk alone. God goes before us, preparing the way, opening doors, clearing obstacles that we do not even see. In a world full of uncertainty, where the future seems uncertain and the challenges seem overwhelming, this promise fills us with hope. No matter how great the challenge, God is already there facing it for us, guiding us towards the purpose that He has designed for our life. Sometimes we face situations in which we feel that we are completely alone, where everything seems to go against us and the feeling of abandonment invades us. But God assures us that He will never leave us or abandon us. His presence is constant, His love is inexhaustible, and His faithfulness never fails. Even if circumstances make us doubt, His promise remains firm. He is in every step, In every struggle and every moment of uncertainty, no matter how dark the road seems, He goes forward, guiding our steps with wisdom and love. Fear and discouragement are two silent enemies that try to hold us back, that make us doubt our abilities, our purpose, and sometimes even God's presence in our lives. But this verse gives us the key to overcome them. Trust that God is present, that it doesn't matter how difficult the situation is, He is in control. There is nothing you will face just because His promise is Clara. He will be with you at all times. Walking with God means living with the certainty that even if we do not always see the way out, He has already traced the way. It means understanding that His times are perfect, that His direction is the right one, and that there is no reason to fear. Many times we want to see the whole picture before we take a step, but God calls us to move forward in faith, to trust that His presence is enough to sustain us and guide us to where we need to be. Discouragement comes when we feel that things are not going as we expected, when plans are not fulfilled, or when we face failures. But God's promise reminds us that we are not alone in those battles. He is fighting for us, marching to the front, protecting us what we can't see. Our task is to trust, to stand firm, and to remember that His presence sustains us, even in the most difficult of times. Every step we take, every challenge we face, is an opportunity to see God's faithfulness in action. He doesn't ask us to have all the answers. He just asks us to trust, to keep moving forward, to leave our worries in His hands, and not to allow fear paralyzes us. He has promised to be with us, and His word never fails. Imagine how different your life would be if you lived every day knowing that God is ahead of you. You would live more calmly, more boldly, knowing that God is there regardless of what happened. If instead of worrying about the future you just believe that He has already ready everything. Verse: to live without fear, to move forward with the confidence that God will never leave us. No matter what you're facing today, it can be a complicated situation in your family, in your work, in your relationships, or perhaps an internal battle that no one else sees, but God does. He is telling you that you are not alone, that you never have been, and that you never will be. His love is constant. His grace, it is enough, and His presence is more than capable of sustaining you in any circumstance. Hold on to this promise. Remember it every day. God goes before you. He is with you and will not allow you to walk alone. Do not allow fear to stop you or discouragement quench your faith. Lift your eyes. Move forward with the certainty that God has prepared a way for you, and although you may not always be able to see it, you can trust that He is the best. He will never leave you. He will never abandon you. And in that truth you can find strength, peace, and hope to move forward. Verse 18, Psalms chapter 27 verse 14, He says, "Wait for the Lord, be strong and courageous." Wait for the Lord. These words teach us a powerful lesson about patience, faith, and perseverance. We live in a world where everything moves fast, where we want immediate answers and instant solutions. But God tells us, He says, to hope we don't rush, to trust in His perfect timing. And while waiting can be difficult, it is in waiting that our faith is strengthened, that we learn to depend completely on Him, and where we find true peace. Waiting on the Lord does not mean sitting idly by, but having an attitude of active trust, of knowing that God is at work, even when we don't see Him. Waiting is a process of transformational growth, learning. It is the moment where God works on our character, where He teaches us to trust Him more and less in our own strength. Sometimes we feel that waiting is a delay, but in reality it is a preparation. God is preparing us to receive His blessings at the exact moment. Discouragement comes when we look around us and it seems that nothing is changing, when we see others moving forward while we are still in the same place. But God tells us to make an effort, to take courage, because the waiting is not in vain. He is never late, He never forgets His promises, and He is always working behind the scenes for our good. No matter how long the wait, the reward is always worth it. It is easy to lose hope when things do not happen as we want, when we face obstacles that seem impossible to, but God calls us to have unwavering faith, to believe that He is in control, that His plan is perfect, and that even though we may not understand the why, we can trust His purpose. Every delay has a purpose, every wait has a reason, and every process brings us one step closer to God's will for our lives. The effort mentioned in this verse is not an effort, it is not a physical effort, but an effort of the soul. It is to fight against doubt, against fear, against impatience. It is to decide every day to trust in God despite what our eyes see. It is to maintain an attitude of faith, of gratitude, of expectation, knowing that God always fulfills what He promises. And when we choose to do this, our faith is strengthened, our heart is filled with peace, and our mind is freed from the stress that comes from the uncertainty. Takes courage. It means remembering who God is, remembering His faithfulness in the past, remembering that He has never failed and never will. No matter how difficult the situation, God is still in control and he continues to work on our behalf. When we put our trust in him, we find the strength we need to keep going, to not give up, to stand firm until we see his glory manifest in our lives, to wait in our lives. Though it is not easy, the Lord's choice is the finest one we can make. It releases us from making snap judgments, from making errors out of desperation, and helps us match our will with his. Waiting helps us to believe that he knows precisely what we need, to give up our goals, aspirations, and concerns and to rely totally on God. And as needed. Imagine what your life would be like if you learned to wait with faith. If instead of worrying about the future, you decided to trust that God has a perfect plan for you, you would live more peacefully, more joyfully, with the certainty that you don't need to have all the answers because God already has them. He is at work even when you don't see him, even when you don't feel him. His love for you is unwavering and his faithfulness is eternal. So don't take heart, no lose hope. Keep trusting, keep waiting, keep striving because God is in control. His timing is perfect, his plan is good, and his love never fails. Wait on the Lord with trust, with courage, with the assurance that the best is yet to come, because when you learn to wait on God, you discover that every moment of waiting is one step closer to his purpose for your life. Verse New Job chapter 23 verse 10 he says, "But he knows my way, if he tests me, I'll come out like gold." These words reflect a powerful truth that we all need to remember in the most difficult moments of our lives. God knows our way, he knows exactly what we're going through, every challenge, every struggle, every trial. Nothing escapes his knowledge, nothing we face is a mystery to him, and most importantly, every trial we face has a purpose. No, it's a punishment, it's not a sign of abandonment, it's a process of refinement, of transformation, a path to something much greater than we can imagine. Trials are not easy, sometimes they hurt, they exhaust us, they make us question everything. We wonder why we are going through certain situations, why things don't go as we expect, because it seems that God is silent. But this verse gives us a different perspective. It reminds us that every trial is an opportunity, a tool God uses to mold us, to purify us, to make us stronger. Just as gold is subjected to fire to remove impurities and reveal its true beauty, God allows certain trials in our lives to bring out the best in others, to strengthen our faith, to teach us to trust fully in him. God knows the path we walk. He sees beyond what we can see. Our vision, it is limited, but God's is eternal. Sometimes what seems like an insurmountable obstacle is in reality a preparation for the blessing that is to come. What we see today as an unbearable trial tomorrow will become our testimony of victory. God never allows something without a purpose. Every experience, every tear, every moment of difficulty is designed to take us to a higher level of faith, of trust, of purpose. It's easy to lose hope when we're in the midst of the fire of trial. We feel alone, confused, without answers. But God is there in every moment, guiding us, sustaining us, strengthening us. He sees us, he understands us, and reminds us that we are not alone in this process. True faith is demonstrated in difficult moments, when we continue to believe, even though everything seems against us, when we continue to trust, even if we do not see immediate results, and when we persevere, when we stand firm in God's promise, we come out of the trial like gold, stronger, wiser, more prepared for what is to come. Tests reveal what is really in our hearts, show us our dependence on God, teach us to let go of our self-sufficiency and to surrender completely to his will. Many times it is in the moments of greatest difficulty where we truly discover who we are and what we are made of. And best of all, God does not leave us in the middle of the process. He walks with us, he sustains us. God loves you so much that he never makes errors. He does not make mistakes either. Sometimes life strikes us with unanticipated challenges, with circumstances that seem to have no answer, with seasons of waiting that try our faith and patience. But the essential is God's kindness does not rely on us. His love and fidelity remain constant, guiding us, maintaining us, and working on our behalf even when we do not comprehend him. He is good constantly, even when we do not see solutions, when doors appear to shut, when everything seems stationary. Seeking God is not just turning to him when things go tough. It is making his presence our daily priority and learning to live in a continuous relationship with him with trust that he will be able to do so. In his goodness we find everything we need when we truly seek him. When we put our trust in him, we begin to see his hand at work in ways we never imagined. His goodness surrounds us, covers us, sustains us in every step we take, not because we deserve it, but because his love is inexhaustible. God rewards those who seek him from the heart. It is not a superficial search or a religious act, but of a genuine longing to be close to him, to know his will, to depend completely on his direction. When we trust in God, our burdens are eased, our fears diminish, and we find a peace that the world cannot offer. The true one in God leads us to rest, to let go of control, to allow Him to take charge of our lives and guide us on the right path. But trust requires patience. Sometimes we want to see immediate results, we want quick solutions. But God teaches us that His goodness is manifested in His perfect timing. He asks us to trust that we hope that we continue to seek Him even when we do not see immediate changes, and when we learn to wait in Him, we discover that every moment, every season has a purpose. His goodness does not always manifest as we expect, but it always manifests itself in the best way for us. The world constantly shows us. Though Satan makes false promises of security and pleasure, only in God can we discover the genuine goodness that remains. His love is continuous, His grace is adequate, and His presence is all we really need to live completely. When we decide to really search for Him, He shows Himself in ways we never would have thought possible. His kindness is evident in His provision, in His protection, in the doors He opens and in the ones He shuts to the fullest. Our well-being, sometimes in the midst of difficulty, it is easy to doubt God's goodness. We wonder why we face certain situations, why the answers take so long to arrive, but His word reminds us that He is good to those who trust Him, to those who truly seek Him. Trusting God allows us to see beyond the circumstance. It gives us the assurance that even if we do not understand in the process, we can trust that His plan is perfect. Imagine what your life would be like if you truly trusted God at all times, if you put every worry, every problem, every decision in His hands without hesitation. You would live with more peace, with more joy, with more certainty that you are never alone. His goodness is real, His love is tangible, and His faithfulness is eternal. You just need to get closer, trust and seek Him with all your heart. So no matter what you're going through today, remember this promise: God is good, His goodness is over your life, He's in every detail, in every step you take. Trust Him, seek Him with a sincere heart, and you'll see how His love transforms every area of your life. Because when we truly seek Him, when we decide to trust in His plan, He never fails us, He never abandons us, and His goodness will follow us all the time. Days of our lives, before you go, I would like you to confirm your faith in God one more. Write in the comments, Lord, I trust You and I let go of what is not for me. Nice. Do it with trust, because you let God operate something much greater in your life when you let go.